Did we start already?
I'm recording. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I kind of started, but kind of not, because I just started recording anyways, and we just kind of
Yeah.
get
So
into it.
the name was recently changed, and it's part of the whole military justice and discipline domain. Before it was under like JAC, but we go along with the area defense councils and the special victims councils, and that we only represent airmen. For us, we're a really big office compared to like an ADC or an SVC. We have almost 20 people, but yeah, everybody who goes through the disability evaluation system, what in a base legal office you'd call getting med boarded, we represent those airmen and guardians too, active duty, National Guard, reservists. So it's a very busy job as far as being on the phones and responding to emails. If you get in trouble in Japan, you call your ADC, and they may be in Japan, they may be in Korea, Guam, but for us, we're the only office that deals with. So if a service member in Japan gets notified on a Friday and they get 6 days to respond to that, we're already, by the time they get the notification and then we get in touch with them, we're already missing days. So we're doing our best to just stay in touch with the entire world about this.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, no, that's interesting, and we'll get a little bit more in depth into the Office of Disability Counsel, or Office Disability Council.
Office of Disability Counsel, ODC.
Oh, okay. We recently got a brief too. I think Major Gore gave us a brief to our office about the slides and brief and about the ODC. So
Major Gore she's incredible. She is our Guard and Reserve coordinator, and I've been working at that office for about 4 months now, and just some of the Guard and Reserve stuff still really confuses me. You can have a Guard member who, because of their injury and just the way their situation is working out with their unit, they could be on no points, no pay status, but still sort of in limbo with what's going on with their cases. Some of these cases drag on for years. For most active duty, it's usually about from the time their PCM flags them to a point where they have a final decision from the Air Force. It's a matter of 6 months, but for our Guard and Reserve members, it's a long time.
Yeah, that's right. And so she handles the Reserve and Guard, or not handles, but kind of brings a lot of information, a lot of expertise with that.
Yeah, she's our SME on that, and we have a civilian attorney who's a retired Air Force Major JAG who has just been in the office long enough, so he gets a fair share. All of our attorneys can do it, but I mean, if you're an attorney and you're there for 6 months, you've got your feet wet, you're rolling, and then all of a sudden one of these Air National Guard or Reserve cases gets thrown at you, and it could be a little bit of a curveball. So that's why we have the continuity with our civilian and our Reserve and Guard coordinator, who is an ARC member who is activated for the position. So they know just like the guardisms to help the rest of our team out.
Right. No, for sure. I know a few people in your office. So I do know Mr. Hasbury. I'm sure that's who you were talking about, the retired major.
Yeah, what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so I worked with him at Lackland. He was a captain at the time. I know he was prior enlisted security forces, I believe.
Yeah, he was. He was a dog handler.
Yeah.
He calls it a puppy pusher, but that's the only job he did as a security force member, so he got kind of lucky. So
that's right.
But no, we're very happy to have him and his expertise. He's actually one of the attorneys that is on my team. We get assigned an attorney to assist with for helping with the service members correspond to either their med group or the Air Force board or the VA. At different stages, we can do different products for them. As far as teaming goes, but like all paralegals do intake where you're sitting at a phone and it never stops ringing. We have the little headsets that you can see at the McDonald's drive-thru just because you got to be able to use your hands and look up all sorts of different information, and you would just be like this all day if you didn't have it.
That's right. Interesting. Yeah. We'll get a little bit more into that. So yeah, Major Hasbury, Major Gore. I also worked with her at Lackland, and Captain Housel. I saw that she was there, but I worked with her at Cadena. Um, so I'm pretty familiar with the team, and I think I'm working with Sergeant Romero on some of these paralegal badging initiatives as well. So
Yeah, I hear her during her meetings, and I'm like, man, Sergeant Perez has got his hands in everything there.
oh, she does. Yeah, Sergeant Romero. She was our team lead, so did a great job with that. All right. So, really, what we're gonna be talking about during this podcast is gonna be really two things because I wanted to bring you in a few months ago. Actually, before your PCS to Lackland, I believe you were deployed. So we'll touch a little bit on that as far as you can share from your deployment. Obviously, we don't want to get into any of the OPSEC stuff, and what type of things you can share as far as the duties and responsibilities that you had while you were deployed in Honduras, right?
Yes.
And yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about, because this is a different aspect of what we do as paralegals, and a lot of us, whenever we step out of the legal office, we go to either the Air Defense Council or the Special Victims Council. Um, so to talk about the ODC and the mission there, and a paralegal role, I think that's going to be interesting as well. So we'll kind of quickly touch on those two things. But before we get started on any of those two, I really would like for you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
All right, so I have a very convoluted last name. It's Olaya-Gonzalez, but the Air Force didn't include the hyphen, so it just looks like one long word. I was born in Colombia in South America, and I moved to the United States when I was 3 years old. Joined the Air Force when I got my green card. I joined later in life. I was 23 when I joined, and then I had a JAG who really pushed me to get my citizenship at my first duty assignment. I got pretty lucky because I wasn't a citizen when I enlisted, so I had a list of about 7 jobs that I could do. I know I had dental services. I couldn't even be a maintainer. I couldn't be a cop. But paralegal was on there, and I had a pretty decent ASVAB score. And I'm like, well, paralegal working with lawyers, that doesn't sound too bad. So I got interviewed at basic training, and then went to 4 base legal offices: Seymour Johnson, Dover, Korea, at Kunsan, so the Wolfpack. And then I went to Pope. From Pope, I deployed to Honduras, and then while I was deployed, I got an assignment that I would be coming to the ODC at Texas. So I go by Sergeant OG. So if anybody's ever worked with me, they probably only know me as OG. Yeah, I've been in the Air Force about 12 years, and I've been a paralegal the entire time.
All right, awesome. So it's interesting you mentioned the citizenship thing, because our last one of our episode 16 was with Ermin Ramsey. Were you able to check that one out?
So I saw Aaron Ramsey through either Facebook or Instagram, because I think that she got coined by the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force. But it's really great to see, service members who choose to be Americans get highlighted. Without touching too much on social issues, some growing up undocumented or of a different ethnicity or background, sometimes I can see how your Americanness or your patriotism can get questioned. But becoming a citizen was, it was probably one of the best days in my mother's life, because she was a young mom with 2 young kids, and we were undocumented for a very long time, and that's not an easy life. A lot of people throw the word illegals around, and as somebody who has been undocumented before, it's a term that I'm not comfortable with because it makes you feel like you're consistently breaking the law or something. And I was 3 years old. I had no choice, but my mother wanted a better life for me and my brother. So, I mean, it was great when I joined the Air Force. Obviously, she missed me and missed me going away. But when I told her, "Hey, I'm going to become a citizen," so she flew down to North Carolina. We had our ceremony at Fort Bragg, and I got a certificate, and I had to shred my Colombian passport. So it was incredible. It was an incredible feeling knowing that that's something that she worked hard for her life to provide a better life for me. And then on the flip side, a couple years later, she got to become a citizen with my brother, and I flew up to Boston. Well, I drove up to Boston to be part of that ceremony, and it was. I'm not somebody who gets emotional, but it was emotional seeing her, become a citizen, and she's gotten to vote in person a lot more times than I have because I've just been mailing in my ballots. But she's 100% Colombian, but she's 100% American, and it's great to see Airman Ramsey being highlighted for that.
Yeah, that's awesome, and definitely glad that you shared that experience. Um, because that's what a lot of it is. It's what America it's all about. It's a lot of what the United States is all about, right? Like we all coming together for a shared purpose from all over the place, all over the globe, and it's I think it's what makes us strong, especially in our military, right? I mean, it's so hard and difficult to plan against or to predict the United States because we're everything and we represent everyone. Um,
Yeah, no, there's been some negative feedback about diversity, but if you hear high-ranking leaders talk about diversity, I mean, they extend it as far as a diversity of opinions, diversity of experiences, diversity of career fields, of mission sets. There's a four-star general named Stanley McChrystal. He was the commander of the JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command, and he's not somebody that you would think would be part of like the woke military. But he goes, when I was a JSOC commander, why would you want everybody who thinks the same way in the same room making decisions? We need these types of inputs. To bring it back down to like a base legal level, first time you do a murder board and you're an A1C with a legal pad, and you're hearing a seasoned attorney making an argument, and you ask that question, hey, why are you doing this? And they're like, I hadn't thought about that. That's a diversity of opinion, and we get those diversity of opinions through our different backgrounds, our different mindsets, our different education levels, our different life experiences. So yeah, that is what America is about. That's what makes a strong team is having different options, having different approaches, having different courses of action to any problem.
right. No, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's super cool. So again, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. And yeah, Erin Ramsey, she shared a lot about the process and some frustrations that she had with the process. Uh, and yeah, and trying to do something to make it better. So um, uh, uh, doing a lot of work with that, and really awesome to see someone for our career field taking a stand in that way. Um, all right, so cool. Yeah, so that's really interesting. Uh, chose paralegal to come in, and then you mentioned that your first duty station was which one was it again? Seymour Johnson, you said?
Seymour, yep, Fourth Fighter Wing down in North Carolina. It's where I met my wife. It's where I made a lot of good friends. It's where I learned to be as good of a paralegal as I can be, because it was a very busy base. I mean, there was 92 F-15s, and when you have 92 F-15s, you have all the maintainers and security forces and all the pluses and negatives that comes with that. So, as a young paralegal looking at 100 Article 15s a year, um, you got to learn your job whether you wanted to or not. And it was tough, but I mean, it set a perspective for me that I always keep in mind. because you work those long days in justice, and then you get to a base that maybe has a different tempo, and you're like, okay, I can see that the Air Force isn't always the same. Two bases in the same state, two different match comms, completely different worlds. Yeah, it was really tough, but you sort of how you learn.
So was that Dover for you then? Once you got to Dover, you were like, oh man, Seymour Johnson, we were crazy busy. And then was Dover a little slower or was it still pretty busy?
They call it lower, slower Dover, but that was good. But it's a if you're used to ACC and you think of fighter pilots, and then you think of AMC and you think of mobility pilots, well, you don't have one person on a cargo plane, you have a whole teamwork. So it's just a different mindset. The military justice cases were still as hard, but there were just as many. We only had about 17 jets, and that's a big difference from 92. But that was a big shock for me. But I mean, it always has its ups and downs, no matter what base you're at. And anybody who's worked at Kadena or Ramstein or Nellis, we'll say 100 Article 15s, that's not much. But anybody who's worked at some other base who does, 3 to 4 Article 15s a year, but is busy with other stuff, you just got to go with the ebbs and flows.
Right. No, absolutely. Every office is different, and it represents their own unique challenges. Even I'm going to a small office, yeah, but it's probably less personnel, doing a lot more. So I mean, you just never know. All right, so I'm really curious then about your deployment. If we can get into that, so you were at Pope, you said, right? So Pope, and you deployed from there.
So Pope, yeah, I deployed from there. I got an email from the NAF paralegal manager, Senior Master Sergeant Hamilton, who is awesome. And she emailed and said, hey, there's 2 spots opening up for deployments. They're both 7 levels. They're both leaving around the same time, and they're both exactly 6 months. So this was in January of 2020, so completely different world ago. And I hadn't really done a full deployment. I'd deployed to the Dominican Republic, which was weird when you say that, and then I deployed to Osan from Kunsan, but those were really like TDYs on CED orders. So I talked it over with my wife, and I said, hey, nobody wants to deploy, but we have a good family situation here in North Carolina. So we were living right near our son, and we have a great relationship with the other set of parents. And I said, hey, might as well be as good of time as any to deploy, because I can get to choose where I'm going. And, next duty assignment and the one after that, I may not get a choice. I may just get an email that says, hey, you're going. So the 2 assignments were to PSAB, Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, and the other one was to Sotocano Air Base in Honduras. And I'd known some people who'd gone to Honduras. I knew 2 of them. And the situation in Honduras is that it's an Air Force deployment, but for the Army who's there and for the Air Force unit who's stationed there, it's just a remote assignment. So, if you deployed to Bagram or Al Udeid, that you can get like a weekend pass, but you're deployed there. Whereas Honduras, you can travel all over Central America. You can come home on a long weekend and stuff. So I was like, hey, look, this might be a chance to go see something cool in Honduras, do a different mission because you're there with the Army, but it's a joint assignment. And I talked to my wife. She said, yeah, go for it. So I emailed back the senior, and I was like, look, I don't care where you send me. I'm ready to deploy, but I just want to let you know I'm fluent in Spanish. I was born in Latin America. I've deployed to Southcom before. And then Chief Oliver emailed back the next day and said, Sergeant OG is going to Honduras. So this was January of 2020. And then, the world changed in March of 2020. So it was up in the air about who was going where, but I did deploy there in mid-April, and the base was completely locked down. And I got to leave the base just twice, and things were getting a little restless and stir crazy on the Army base because it's the base it has a history of being a forward operating base for Southcom special ops and anti-drug missions. But during COVID, our humanitarian projects, we had to keep them going but push them back because like one of the big projects is helping the local population of Honduras. Honduras is, fantastic people, very lovely, very warm. Unfortunately, it's a very poor nation. So we would, in a non-COVID environment, every month there would be a hike where everybody who volunteers would load up with supplies, humanitarian supplies, and hike to a local town and distribute them. Well, you couldn't do that with COVID. COVID is bad in the United States, but COVID is definitely worse in Central and South America. Not by the numbers, because America is a huge country, but if you have insurance, you can go get taken care of. In Honduras, the situation was like they had 40 beds for people with COVID for the country in the main hospitals. In a hospital that would treat a service member, there were 40 beds. Most people just, you would go to your local doctor and they'd say like, we don't have a respirator for you. We don't have any treatment for you. So we had to shut down the base. Our local nationals, only the really mission essential ones, would come to work. There was no weekend pass. Clearly, there was no scuba diving trips to Costa Rica. So there was times when it was just me in the office because the JAG was there, but the JAG was getting pulled all around, and I didn't have my local national for continuity because she was immunocompromised and she'd been working in a legal office for 40 years, but that's not essential. Right. So it was really cool.
Wow. And so what did I don't know, what did a regular day look like? What were your responsibilities while you were there?
So it was just like you would do a base legal office, but pared down and then throw in the Army in there. So, I did civil law, doing quick cursory legal reviews from my attorney for, ops missions, or, hey, the ambassador wants to come, or Southcom has got this question. But also, a soldier got in trouble for drinking too much and they rolled one of the gators, or a soldier didn't want to come to work. So I was doing military justice for the Army. I wasn't doing military justice for the Air Force. So I had to learn a whole new language, a whole new version of basically our AmJams, learn the Army regulations on military justice. And I thought, like, man, the Air Force is really well behaved here. But one time, the first sergeant for the Air Force unit called, and he had a situation with one of his members. So me and my JAG went over there and talked to him. And I was like, wow, you guys don't really get in trouble. I haven't had any Article 15. It's like, well, they don't go through you. They go through 12th Air Force. And I'm like, oh, that makes sense. But I could have been doing both at the same time if they'd given me AmJams access. But working with the Army as far as Article 15s go, it was definitely different because just learn a whole new form, and there's no commanders on G series orders, so that's one thing you didn't have to take care of. But the sergeants major really did a lot of the work that you would do with a first sergeant and the commander. So the sergeant majors would be the one to do the offering, and so you'd be coordinating with an E9 every time. And I sort of felt outnumbered because I was the only one of the only Air Force people that was like dealing with Army commanders that frequently.
Wow. Do they also have do they have metrics?
No. For some reason they didn't care about those metrics. No. So that was nice and refreshing, but I think I would have done a good job since, I mean, the service members weren't going on leave and the commander wasn't going to be out of town. I didn't track the metrics because I think I'm not a big fan of the way we push those metrics. But the Army commanders were pretty junior when you think about when you're doing an Article 15 for a squadron commander, and most of the time you got a seasoned major or a lieutenant colonel. My company commander was a second assignment captain. So I would interact a lot with their first sergeant. Not that the captain didn't know what I was doing, but it can be kind of intimidating to you're a 26-year-old captain about to take a stripe from a 30-year-old E6 or something like that. It was interesting.
Huh. So was it just Army and Air Force then that were there? Were there other services?
There were some services there. There was Navy Special Warfare there. There was some Marines, but what usually happens is that like a Marine unit out of Florida would deploy there like as a unit, but because of COVID, that didn't happen there. So it was just the Army. It was the majority. Air Force was the second most. I don't remember any Navy besides the Special Warfare people, and then the Marines were the least. But it was just the Marines like who were working on the staff, so there wasn't really an operational Marine element there. But it was cool because it was all the services. Space Force wasn't there yet; they may be in the future. But there was also total force. Like there was an Puerto Rican Army National Guard MP unit that deployed there as a whole. So that was interesting too because when you deploy as an airman, as a paralegal, you just go with like whoever JAX tells you to go. But when you see a unit deploy together, you sort of, they bring all their positives and their negatives with them. So you could have a good continuity of command, but you could also have a negative continuity of the bad apples. And in a deployed situation during COVID, that really popped out. There was some serious insubordination issues with some of those guardsmen. But yeah, that was interesting. It was a joint environment for sure in the most whole way, because I got to work with all of them, and different commands, different structures. I knocked out SEJ PME down there because I thought like, well, when else am I going to get to use it in practice? So it was really cool. I would advertise that if you're a paralegal and you see that deployment pop up, especially in a post-COVID world, it's a great opportunity for a staff sergeant, a tech sergeant to run their own office without being in the repetitive nature of being a defense paralegal or a special victims paralegal, because those jobs, while very fulfilling and helping our airmen, you're just doing one lane. But if you deploy where you're the NCOIC of the legal office, especially to a great environment like that, I'd suggest you jump on that. That would be the most ideal deployment for me in a non-COVID world, which is why I volunteered for it. But I mean, even with COVID, I got to make some good friends and learn some cool things about the Army. And I got to go shooting with them. I got to ride in a Chinook. It was pretty rad.
Nice. That's really good. Yeah, no, they're all incredible experiences. I've deployed 3 times, twice as a paralegal. They've been great. I've enjoyed all my deployments for sure. The growth that happens there, you know, working with sister services or foreign members of foreign military. Uh, it's getting to learn how they do things, and just opening your eyes and opening your whole entire um you know essentially membership of the armed forces, because you're expanding your knowledge within the whole total force. um and really an amazing experience, so I'm glad that you were able to to go to experience that. um it just makes us better and allows us to grow as we continue to move on and progressing through the ranks. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, definitely. Like from the missions that they've done in the past and the missions that they have planned for the future for that assignment, there's deployments from that deployment to Colombia, to Brazil. Even though that's past like this Central America, what they call CENTAM AOR, it's still part of Southcom. So it would be really cool. I mean, when you're down there, you're really the only Air Force paralegal for the entire Central America, because you got Joint Task Force Guantanamo, but that is dedicated to a special mission set. I mean, that's just for the prosecution down there, the logistical support. But I mean, south of Texas, you're the only paralegal there. It was really cool because I would call up, the paralegals who were at Army South and AF South and Southcom, putting together, when the new commander got there, he wanted to know, hey, if it comes to this, who can I impose NJP on? And if it came to this, who could I prefer or refer charges on? And it took a lot of asking questions because, it's the difference between COCOM versus TACON and ADCON. So it took some research. It definitely, some of those things that you learn in op law, for day 1 or 2 or 3 of 7-level school, you really have to put it into perspective and learn it again and call, the master sergeant, the Air Force master sergeant who's stationed at Southcom, who works with these questions every day for the admiral who's down there.
Yeah, no, for sure. And in addition to that, it makes studying for the for the doctrine version of the PDG a bit easier. That was one of the most challenging. But after the deployment experience, yeah, you have some familiarization with the terminology and the actual, putting in practice. Uh, yeah, the whole operations law and the way that we do combat.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you're a staff sergeant and you got your E6 test coming up, like, one, you're deployed, so you can't mess around on the weekends. You can't take long trips, and two, you're going to be learning all the Army ranks and all the Marine ranks and how they operate. What an MEF is, what a company is versus brigade versus battalion versus regiment. Why not trying to learn that?
Nice. Did you do any claims while you were there?
I did not, because the paralegal who was down there was working remotely, but I got a chance to review a lot of the documents because, sometimes just like a helicopter working overhead or flying overhead can disrupt somebody's like house. Because if you're familiar with some of the architecture of developing nations, that are not very affluent, you have like tin racks and tin walls and things like that. So that stuff can blow it up. So the ones that I looked at, I didn't get a chance to work on. It was those types of things. It was like somebody's whole house being displaced just because of updraft from a helicopter.
Right. Right. Yeah. They're not stable, so any little thing will will damage it. Gotcha. All right. Well, cool. Anything else that you wanted to share from the deployment experience in Honduras?
Yeah, Honduran food is great. So it's just another reason to plug if you get an opportunity to go down there. I know the guy who deployed after me, he was Mexican, and no, I think he was Dominican. But somebody after that, I don't think they were Hispanic, so don't think like, hey, I'm not going to deploy to this place because I don't speak Spanish. Because hey, you can deploy there, you can have Spanish classes, and you're not going to be speaking Spanish all the time, but it helps to shore up your practice while you're down there with working with the locals and the Puerto Rican Air National Guard and the employees at the dining facility. And so yeah, I'm just trying to get people to deploy down there because it's a great assignment.
No, for sure. And I think now, and I think this is new that started maybe last year, that on roster you can go and click uh, if you want to volunteer for a deployment. That's one way to get deployed now. I know there's a button that you click and it stays on, and they can definitely, whenever they look for people to deploy, they can at least start with potentially people that want to go.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a lot better if you have somebody who has the motivation to go as opposed to somebody who gets tapped to replace somebody, and then they're stuck there. I actually had that close call when I was in Pope. There was somebody who dropped out of a Bagram deployment, and the NAF said to me and my loss, "Hey, you guys are the only 2-7 levels in AMC who can go right now because of coding. So you'd be deploying in 3 weeks." And my supervisor got the short straw, and he deployed to Bagram. He got stuck there for 8 months. But if somebody had hit that button and said, "Hey, I want to go to Bagram," they probably would have got started first. So hit that button if you really want to deploy. Make it known.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a good tool, and I'm glad that they added it to give those individuals that opportunity. All right, so you get back from deployment, and did you get picked up for ODC while you were deployed?
Yeah, I got the Pope as a follow-on assignment to Korea, because I've been trying to get back to North Carolina to be near my son. So got back to the States in August of 2018, and I thought I was going to be at Pope for a lot longer. But around September of 2020, I got an email saying, "Congratulations on your new assignment." And I wasn't thrilled about it because, I would have gotten back to the States in October, and then PCS'd in February. So that's what I did. I got back in October, took some time, pushed me right up until the holidays, and then I had basically 2.5 months to PCS. But everybody knows when you join up for the military, you only have so much say in where you get to live. So it wasn't a bad assignment. I liked the area, and I knew an attorney who had gone there, and I'm like, "Hey, what's the office?" They're like, "Well, it's busy, but it's different and it's pretty interesting." So I got here at the end of February, right after the snowstorm in Texas, and it was a little unsettling getting to a job that you have no idea how things work. If you think about going from the base legal office as a senior airman or a staff sergeant to be the defense paralegal, well, you've probably worked a couple of courts right there. You've definitely worked a couple Article 15s. You've worked a couple discharges boards, so you know what the other side is if you want to think in adversarial terms. But you only hear about people getting med boarded, but you don't really know what that means, and that's not even the correct terminology for it. So when I got there, I'm like, what is all this? And I was really unsure about what I was doing. But we have a really good training program here, a good phased approach to learning. And after a couple of weeks, I just realized, like, oh yeah, I'm starting to get the flow of things. But it was very intimidating because people are calling you on some of their worst days when they realize, like, I'm a 17-year master sergeant and now I'm going to get put out. And you're the one picking up the phone. You're the one answering the questions. Luckily, we have great paralegals, great attorneys who can help out, and we do what we can for our airmen and guardian going through this process.
Right. So I'm just curious because I thought those positions get advertised in AMS. Did they not, or do they not?
No, they do. It's a job like an area defense counsel or a special victims paralegal, where you can get vetted. You can submit your application, and leadership might say, it's probably not the right fit for this person, but sometimes you just get non-voled, and that's what happened to me. I got non-voled. But I called the superintendent, who was then Master Sergeant Alan Salmones, and I talked to him about what's going on. I talked to him about my family situation, and I talked about it with my wife, and I said, look, it's not like we can say no, because then you turn down an assignment, you're coded, you're done. And it's not that bad of a location. She didn't want to leave North Carolina, but I said, San Antonio is a great city with a lot of things to do, and the job will be interesting. So we came here, and it has been a very interesting job, just dealing with people who are really confused about the situation and really feel like they're getting no help. And we're the only people that are helping them in the military, because the med group has their own priorities in this, and the AFPC has their own priorities in this. So we're there for the airmen. It's why we used to be called the Office of Airmen's Counsel, but we don't help just airmen. Like I said, we help guardians too, and we're helping service members who are injured with visible or invisible injuries, a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder from combat, from military sexual violence, a lot of mental health, a lot of back injuries, a lot of knees, a lot of feet. The tolls that the military just takes on your body, and sometimes the Air Force says, like, well, unfortunately, it's time for you to not be in the military anymore. And by the way, here's this process, and here's this number, call them and they'll help. And that's what we do.
Gotcha. And what are some of your responsibilities then as the paralegal? I saw that you were, so when I looked at roster, I saw that you were a policy. Was it policy? So there's two, it seems like two sections, right?
The policy, and then there's the outreach. I think those are the two branches. But ultimately, you're responsible for intake. So we have thousands of clients a year, and we take shifts either covering the phones or covering the org box, because right now we have 4 paralegals with 1 more inbound, and we are staffed where we need to be as far as handling that workload. You're also responsible for teaming with an attorney when helping prepare correspondence to either the med group in things like a letter of rebuttal, because when you're being put through the disability evaluation system, the DES process, which most people call getting MEB'd, the medical group is responsible for preparing a narrative summary about what's wrong with this service member, and the service members don't always agree, so they contact us and we help them write a letter of response, the same way you would do a rebuttal to an LOR, so that when the AFPC looks at it, they may take a different opinion to what the med group is saying. And then ultimately, when a service member does get a decision by the informal physical evaluation board that says, hey, your disabilities are unfitting and you're going to get separated from the military, whether that be with a medical retirement or just a discharge with severance pay, we assist the service members in making their arguments to a formal board. So like the same way you would do with a discharge board or a court martial, helping gather evidence, helping do interviews, helping prepare the attorney's arguments, and looking for things that the service member may ask, because the service member may say, like, yeah, my back is messed up, but my knees are too, and here I'll show you why my knees are messed up. Or the service member may say, no, I can actually do my job. I can actually deploy. I can actually pass an Air Force PT test, and here's how I can show you that I can do all those things. And as a paralegal, you're assisting the attorney in these things, preparing the service member to make their case to their board. The service member has a chance to call into the hearing. It used to be a formal hearing in person, but because of COVID, we have to lock this down. So you help draft the questions and take different approaches that you would do with the board. And then other times the service member would say, like, I'm fine separating. I just think I deserve a higher rating. And you do a VA ratings reconsideration where the VA gives you a number. They look at the tests that they do. They look at your medical records and they just say 20%. And the service member is like, what do you mean 20%? I can barely get out of bed. And you take all the research, you take all the medical records, you take all the information that the service member provides for you, and you do a legal review about their entire argument, and hopefully, you get the VA to get it right. That's a pretty good feeling. I had a service member who was in a pretty bad accident, and she was rated at 20% for some very visible injuries and some very limiting injuries, and we raised her to 80%. And that's a difference between getting out of the military and having TRICARE for life. That's a big, for some service members, they're fine with separating, but if you have a family, you've put in 15, 16 years, and the Air Force says, here's discharge, here's a paycheck, that's not always the best option. Sometimes sometimes the health insurance is enough. So they get if we get them over a certain threshold, we can get them TRICARE for life for them and their dependents.
Wow. Very interesting. Interesting process, and a lot different than all the things that we see on a daily basis, especially for us, for our career field. So that is cool, and another element of helping other airmen, right? With, well, whether it's as a SVP or DP, and there you go. You have the ODC as well.
No, it definitely, that is. I mean, the work is a lot, and you don't always have success. In fact, the success rate for getting service members returned to duty is less than 10%. But when you get those victories, when you get somebody a much higher compensation, when you get somebody the ability to continue with their mental health treatment after they get out of the military, it feels really good, especially for our service members who have PTSD or depression, or a lot of the things that really are going to impact you for the rest of your life. That service member and the Air Force agree, like, I shouldn't be in the Air Force, but hey, Air Force, you have some contribution to what's wrong with me right now. So really, for equity's sake, I deserve TRICARE. And that's really helpful to be able to get somebody to retire. Because sometimes the Air Force doesn't care how long you've been in. Like, you could be in 19 years and the Air Force says, sorry, like, it's just, you're broken, but not broken enough to get TRICARE for life, but too broken to keep coming to work. And I'm at 12 years, and I can't imagine like how crushing that would feel to know that through no fault of my own, I'm not going to be able to keep providing for my family. So it can be emotionally tolling to talk to service members. But you take your victories where you can, and the teamwork that you do with your attorney, and when your attorney tells you, hey, you did a great job with this, and our client walked away satisfied and got what they felt they deserved, that's what keeps you going through the next round of phone calls.
Right. So how do you like it so far?
It's very interesting. I mean, like I said, I got there and I didn't know what was going on, but once I felt like I could, have a conversation with a service member and assist them. That was really good, because sometimes, you say to them, hey, we're here for you. Like, and they say, thank goodness, because, nobody else is on my side. My med group isn't listening to me. My commander may not care about me, and they just want to move me along, but I have a right to be heard. It feels good to be helping a service member, because I grew up on military justice, and while you think about the big picture, You think about the service member who messed up once and has to pay for it for the rest of their career because they lost a stripe and now they're not eligible to test for 3 years, or you forget about the humans when you're pushing numbers and you're pushing metrics and you're pushing specifications. But when you're looking at somebody's injuries, or they're so depressed that they can't sleep, and then their insomnia affects their work, and then you tell them, hey, we're on your side for this, we're going to do our best to make sure your case is heard. It really puts a different perspective on the I'm not going to say the practice of law, but the application of law and the usefulness of the law. So it's good to be able to assist people in that way.
Yeah, no, for sure. It definitely seems interesting. I got a little taste of it while I was there at Lackland, so I was able to visit the office and even witness one of the I guess one of the hearings, um, which is another interesting, very interesting process as well. So, yeah, no, really cool, and one of those jobs that doesn't really get a lot of advertisement. Um, that is not well, at least from when I was coming up through the ranks. I'm not sure now. Probably they do in the Jack School. Maybe they bring it up at PAC or PCC and other courses. Um, but I know that it's not always out there as an option for paralegals to say, typically, like we mentioned before, DPSVP, but you don't really know there's another option potentially for you to explore. And in a great location, you go into San Antonio because you're at Randolph, right?
Yeah, I'm at Randolph, and a lot of people think you're going to go to San Antonio, you're only going to Lackland, and you're going to be in one of the busiest legal offices in the Air Force. But Randolph's it's a good location. It's a good mission. You have some long days, but it's not going to be like working weekends, prepping for a court martial. And what you were talking about is a job that you don't really hear advertised. When I was an airman, I didn't know about it. So we're doing our best to get our information out there. If you have an office that wants training on it, we can put on our mission brief, and we're free to answer questions and talk about, the scenario. Because we can help legal offices with information, even though we're almost sort of on opposing sides. But what we really want to do is let the JAG community know about our job and our expertise and our assistance, and come work for the ODC. San Antonio is a great location. You get to be part of a pretty decent legal office, practicing something that's pretty unique and very, very fulfilling. When you really think about what you're doing. So not just JAGs, but paralegals, of course. Like we do the job, and it's part of our mission. But really, it's rewarding to know that you help service members like this.
Absolutely, and yeah, no, it moved. So I think it began. I'm not sure if it began, but it used to be at Lackland, moved to Randolph. So definitely a better, a better base, I think, in my opinion, right? Some people like Lackland, but I do believe Randolph is the better location. And yeah, and something totally different. And in addition to that, yeah, our office received a brief. So if if anyone's office is interested in getting that mission brief from the ODC and getting more in depth as to what they do and all other details, then definitely get with them to get that off. It can be part of your training.
Especially if I'd known about this office when I was in NCOIC of discharges, and I was wondering why my cases were busting metric when they get to AFPC. I wish I could have called the ODC at the time and saying, hey, can you explain to me what's going on so I can at least let my commander know about why this is not moving along the way it should.
Yeah, and that's that option as well that you get, because so essentially they send up the discharge as a, so it's both med board and admin discharge. Uh, and I guess well, from what I remember, sometimes one couldn't complete without the other, or would the med board have to finish before the admin board or the admin discharge?
So they've changed the regulation recently, even as far as to who can approve it. It used to be the SAF-PC Council. Now, in some cases, it could be the GCM commander, and we don't work for the GCM commander, but we can say like, hey, this is what we're seeing, and we have our own interests, and our interest is to get our service members the most amount of benefits or whatever separation they would like, or returning to duty. But we can at least advise you, because we this is all we see is disability evaluation system cases. A discharge clerk pushes, they get 5 or 6 boards a year. That's a lot of work, but we have hearings every single day. Some of our attorneys, pretty much having a hearing 3 to 4 times a week. So we know what the AFPC looks for as far as what they consider to be separation criteria. So yeah, give us a call if you want to come work for us, or if you have questions, or if you want us to see if somebody at AFPCJA knows what's going on, because we're different from them as well.
For sure. Well, Sergeant OG, I want to thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I know we were supposed to do one last year, trying to do one while you were in Honduras, but we still were able to make it happen. So definitely thank you for wanting to share your experience from the deployment and telling us a little bit about the ODC.
Yeah, no, it was, it would have been, I think I would have been fresher about what I was doing on a day-to-day basis if we'd done this while I was deployed. But I'll tell you that my Wi-Fi was really bad. It was like, if you've ever tried to watch a YouTube video and it buffers and you're like, what is going on? That's how bad the Wi-Fi was when I was down there. Yeah. But I mean, it's probably my only complaint about the deployment, that besides COVID. So thank you for giving me a chance to talk on this. I'm glad that we can finally get our schedules lined up, and just thank you, and keep doing what you do, and highlighting different paralegal stories, different airmen's, different life experiences. It's great that you're doing this for us.
Yeah, no, for sure. I appreciate it. Appreciate the support.
All right.
Well, thanks, and yeah, we'll see you around, and take care.
All right. Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Thanks.